In this video, I want to create a can of soda and create an animation for it by jumping around the scene and then exploding and then reforming. The first thing I would do is go to my front view and create a line. I need to snap the first and last vertices. So here I am in snap mode. I'll click and I'll create a rough form for this. It's not really the exact form, and right click. But now I would go to modify and go to vertex, select these vertices and move them up. Here I would uncheck snap by pressing S and select these vertices and move them to the side, and then select this one and move it down. Alright, now here I'll select these two and scroll down. I am still in vertex mode to fillet, and I'll create the fillet like this. Okay, now here it didn't really work. Sometimes it happens. When it does, you select all the vertices by pressing Ctrl A, you right click and choose corner. You do this only in case it doesn't work with the fillet. So now if I go to fillet and I fillet, it works. Alright, so say like this and maybe a little fillet from here, and also go down here, fillet these, and another fillet from there. Now here I'm going to be in XY, so this is X, this is Y, and this is XY, and I'll zoom over and I'll drag this down a little bit to create a curve down below, and also a bit of curving from up here. Alright, so I need now to lathe this up, so I'm gonna apply the Lathe Modifier, L-A-T-H-E, and choose Max. And there I would have my can. It's probably too long, so I'm gonna go back to Vertex. I can click on Show End Result. That way I can see the line and the finished solid, and therefore select the vertices and push them to the side. That way I would have a clearer idea about the proportions. I'm good now, so I'm gonna go back to Lathe and weld the core to remove the artifact from the center, and also increase the segments, say to 40, so that, or maybe more, 60, so that I have a nice smooth roundness. I have a problem because I'm gonna explode this, which is the horizontal subdivisions, which I don't have. To get them, I'm gonna uncheck Show End Result just to see the line. I will select this segment here, right, and I'll scroll down. Remember, I'm in segment mode, and there is my divide command. So if I up the value, say to something like 14 and divide, I'm gonna have 14 vertices inside, which means that if I go to Lathe, I'm gonna have my horizontal segmentation, and therefore now I'm being able to do stuff. For example, I can bend this around and it works properly because of the segments. In case I didn't increase these segments, let's delete them just for comparison, and I applied the bend, it wouldn't really work because it doesn't have the segmentation. So I undid the deletion, and I need to place the center of the object or the pivot point down here. I'm going to remove the bend temporarily and go to Hierarchy, Effect Pivot Only, and set the X, Y, and Z values to 0, which means that the center is down here, or the pivot point. So if I rotate it, it will be here instead of rotating from up here. Alright, so again, Hierarchy, Effect Pivot Only, and 0 for X, Y, and Z. This works, the 0 values work in case you are creating everything centered to the grid here. Otherwise, 0, 0, 0 would have no meaning. You would have to snap the pivot point then. Alright, so I have this now. if I applied the bend and change the angle and the axis, it works properly by keeping the base straight. Alright, so what I need to do now is animate this bouncing around. Actually, bend is not the modifier that I want to apply here. What I want to apply is a squash modifier, because I want this to look like it's actually squashing and stretching. So I'm going to go to modifier list and look for stretch. That's the modifier that I want to use now. Stretch, in this case, it's not stretching properly. I need to be in the y-axis. So that's what the stretch will do, to stretch it up and squash it down by keeping the volume. So this is very useful for cartoony animations. Alright, so I'm gonna reset this back to 0. And this is the animation I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make it, first of all, fall down on the ground, and then do some stretching, and then explode, and then reform, and then move away from the camera view. That's the animation that I want to do. So first I'm going to put it up, and I'm going to set my interpolation to linear. That's how I always start my animation, by setting the interpolation to linear. Alright? Auto key. Now, why do I set them to linear? Because I need them to stay in place whenever I copy the keyframes. You'll see that in a second. But I have to actually convert some keyframes to smooth to create a proper animation. But my starting base is linear interpolation. So at frame 0, it's up here. I'm going to set a keyframe. And in 5 frames, say, it's going to fall down and set the z value to 0. So now, if I press play, it falls down fast. But I want it to bounce a bit when it falls down. So here, it fell down. So I'll go 3 frames after that, and I move it up. And then 3 frames, I'll move it down. So this is 0. And then one more maybe. But it goes up a bit less. And then it goes down. So if I played my animation, alright, that's what I have. But I need to fix the curve because it doesn't really look like it's bouncing. It looks like it's very light. It doesn't look like it has weight, especially at the end here. Because whenever something bounces, the keyframes that are in the air should be curvy. Right? And the keyframes that are on the ground should be sharp or linear. To fix this, I'll right click and go to my curve editor. Remember, the up and down motion is the Z position. So if I go to Z position, here I see my curve. So as I said, the keyframe that is in the air should be smooth. So I'm going to click here. And now it actually looks like a bouncy drawing. Again, I'll select this one and make it smooth. I can zoom in to this area. And maybe I'll just lift this up a bit more. And this a bit higher. So if I rewind and press play, alright, now the motion is much more convincing. Okay. So that's the bouncy motion. Now let's work on the stretch motion. So while it falls down, it's going to be stretchy. So it goes down like this. So before it hits the ground, it's a bit stretchy. And when it goes back up, the stretch goes back to 0. So I have this. And when it hits the ground, it's a bit stretchy, but not as much as before. And then up in the air, it loses its stretchiness. And then when it hits the ground the last time, it's a bit stretchy. And then after a while, it resets to 0. So if I press play, alright, I can exaggerate it by actually compressing it when it goes up like this. So up here, you will see how I'll fix it. Alright, so it goes up, down, and then stretches, squashes down a little bit here, and then resets back to 0. So let's see now. Alright, it's not bad, but one thing I might try is this. And that is actually shifting the position of the keyframes. So if I go down, that's the object, it's called line 01. I need to go to the modified object stretch and the stretch value. These are the keyframes. They are linear. I'm going to make them smooth to see what I get here. And one thing I might do is actually shift the timing of all the keyframes. Alright, it's giving me something. I'm going to shift a bit more. Alright, it's better actually. And at the beginning, I'm going to take just this first keyframe and move it a bit like this. Alright. Another thing I might try is select all the keyframes here, stretch, and make them auto so that they flow a bit nicer. Alright, it's not bad. So if I see this in solid view, that's what I get. Alright, then I want it to explode. So I want it to stay put, say for until frame 40. So I'm going to set a keyframe with auto key on. And then I want it to start to shake before it explodes. So I'm going to go by 2 frames, say 42, and stretch up a bit, and then down, and then stretch higher, and then down. Because the keyframes are very close to each other, this will create a shaking effect. And then it holds for a while. And then it squashes down, let's say 62 or 63. And here it's going to explode. So let's see what we have so far. Alright. Okay, it would be nice, because this effect is not bad, it would be nice if we had a bit more of this. So I'm going to delete the last keyframe. And I'm going to copy these keyframes. So shift and move, just to have more time when it does this. Alright, of course it would be better if it kept expanding, because when I copied the keyframes, it retracted back. I can fix this easily in the curve editor by going to my stretch keyframes, and here you see that they are going down. All I have to do is just move them up, and that way it works. So the expansion will keep going. Alright, say like this. Okay, so if we play it now, Alright, and then it stretches down, and here I need the explosion to happen. See, it's going down fast. Maybe too slow. I'll just bring this closer. Alright, and at 83 I want the explosion to happen. So I go to space warps, and I add under geometric deformable a bomb space warp, which should be planted here at the center. Right? So that's the bomb. Remember, the detonation or the time of the explosion should start at 83. So I'm going to bind this to the space warp. So maybe select the bomb and drag to the can, or select the can and drag to the bomb. Now when I did this, I got the explosion happening already, because by default the detonation or the time of the explosion is 5. So I'm going to change this to 83, which means that at 83 I'm going to have the explosion happening. It's going down, so I'm going to set the gravity to 0 so that it doesn't go down. And the chaos will actually scatter the particles. Alright, so play. Alright, but I want it to actually explode a bit more violently. So for this I increase the strength, say to 5. There you go. Now I'm going to increase my time, say to 160. So that we have more time. It explodes. And then we need more actually. Let's go to 200 or 220. Now at 130 it should start to reform. So I need to bring back the strength to 0. That's how the animation of the explosion will be removed. So I'm gonna bring this back to 0 at 130. So if you press play, yeah, but it's not exploding all that much because it's starting to degrade in strength from frame 0. So I'm gonna bring this, say, to frame 100, which is the start of the degradation of the strength. Alright, maybe I need to give it more time. Let's say 150. Alright, another thing I want to do without auto key first is increase the spin value so that they rotate when they explode, the particles. You see they are rotating, but I need to make the spin 0 at the end so that it doesn't spin forever. You see it's spinning. So at frame 150 the spin value should be 0, and at 0 I set it to 1 because 2 is too fast. Alright, play. And then it should bounce back up. So here at 150 is the end of my explosion. So I'm going to go to stretch, and let's set this value, say, to -1.5 at this time. And then right away, 3 frames later, it goes up and then jiggles down. So I'm moving by intervals of 3 frames every time and bouncing on and off the stretch value until it settles down back to 0. The more steps you give this, the more rubbery the animation will look like. So eventually it settles back to 0. So if I play this now, you see at the end it's rubbery because if I find it too slow at the end, which I do, I can select these keyframes, right click and choose configure and show selection range, and here I can actually scale them down, which means that this segment of the animation will be faster. Alright, so this is much better. Alright. I still need to fix the beginning because I don't like the way it looks at the beginning. It's a matter of shifting the keyframes. I'll do this next. But first, I'm going to add a material for this. So, say here, I'm going to open my material editor. Let's say Coca-Cola. And go down to Maps, Diffuse Color, Bitmap. That's the logo. Assign it, and here. Now, when I assigned it, it came in the wrong direction. Right? So what I need to do is actually rotate the texture 90 degrees. Or in my case, negative 90 degrees. And I can tile it, say, twice. Like this. I also would give it some shininess. So I'd go up here, look at the material. If I increase the specular level, it becomes shiny. Also, to make it look more realistic, I can go to reflection and give it a reflection map. Say something like this image here. So if I render now, it would be too reflective because of the strong reflection. But what I can do is reduce this from 100 down to something like 12, and it will look better because of the reflection. Maybe it's too much like this. I need a bit less. Alright, and when I render this, I need to render it, so I'm gonna add a camera. If I have a view and I need a camera from this view, I press Ctrl C. This will create a camera for me automatically. There's the camera. I can go to my top view and fix its position. And there you go. One last thing I need to do, or one more thing I need to do, is make the particles two-sided, because I can see them only from one side instead of both. To do that, up here in the root of the material, I have a two-sided checkbox so that the material appears properly. And I would want to change the background color to something light gray, for example. Now, to complete the exercise, I need to have lights and shadows. Otherwise, it wouldn't look too real. So I'm going to go and create a plane. For the ground. And this plane actually needs to be bent because I don't want to see the end here. So I'm going to apply a bend modifier and increase the bending to 90 degrees and change the axis to X. And here I need minus 90 degrees, but I also need to limit the effect. Okay, I got the opposite of what I want, so I will rotate this 180 degrees from the top view. So now if I press P to go back to perspective, this is what I have. You see, picture like this is a studio and you are rendering against this background. I would give this a grayish color for the background. and maybe I'm gonna give it a reflection to see what it looks like. So if I go down to maps, go to reflection, click on none, and here I'm gonna add ray trace. I'll go back to my camera and render, and here I see that the can is actually reflected on the ground. And I'm gonna go to parent and reduce the amount, say to 15%. So when I render now, I will have a softer reflection. Maybe 22% is a better value. I don't know. And then I would render this, and I would see the animation. Of course, I need to add some text and some sound effects, and I'll do this next.